Hey guys, so I'm here a little bit early to take you guys through some of the latest headlines. They certainly are quite interesting. We are going to deal with this particular image that we've got over here, which is an aerial view of, I think it's 1967 Whiteman Drive, right? We're going to come back to that. But before we do, I want to look at some headlines. So let's start off with this one from the Daily Mail. It's, I think, from today, exclusive, and it's talking about all of that. It is, as you can see, 4th of November. And the part I want to highlight is this section here. Oh, sorry, you guys can't see that. The part I want to highlight is this section here. Meanwhile, a close study of the transcript of Klein's 2020 police interview, that's 2 years ago, has revealed that law enforcement never suspected Klein of being Bridge Guy. Klein was never suspected of being Bridge Guy, but they were convinced that he was protecting the killer's identity. So in other words, think about this. They knew that the Anthony Shots profile communicated with Libby. It was one of the last communications, if not the last, right? And Keegan Klein was using the Anthony Shots profile, but he's not Bridge Guy, right? And Keegan Klein said that multiple people were using it. So who else could be Bridge Guy? The other thing is they were convinced that he was protecting the killer's identity. Then it goes on to say, the transcript shows that when Klein denied knowing who killed the girls, a polygraph showed that he was lying. In other words, it suggests that he did know who killed the girls. That's definitely pretty interesting. So I'll put a link to this article in chat. SM Kovalinsky says, so they knew there was a connection. That's one kind of possible connection. The question is there more than that? Let's have a look. So I don't know whether you could say him failing the polygraph on that question is evidence of a connection. Suppose you could, but I hope that's not all they've got. So then here's another headline from the New York Post, also today. Oh, actually, it's 2 days ago. Cops searched Delphi murder suspect's home for 12 hours. The part that I wanted to highlight is just the section here where they say he didn't really have any friends. I don't think anyone was really friends with him, which I found quite interesting. Quiet people who kept to themselves. Okay, so the next one I want to go to is ABC7 Chicago. They actually found that he's got a limited criminal history. And if you think about that, I've heard a rumor that he may have broken into a neighbor's garage. I've heard something about that. I don't know if that's the limited criminal history. I guess it could almost be anything. But anyway, there it is. I don't think that the limited criminal history is similar to Keegan Klein's, although who knows at this point. So that is from this article from ABC7, and it came out yesterday. So I'll also put a link to that in chat. Okay, and then I think there's one more article I wanted to highlight. It's from wishtv.com, and it's just basically that little section there. Has Keegan been cooperative? Has Keegan Klein been cooperative? And Carter didn't really want to answer that. I find that really, really interesting because all he had to do is say yes or no. If he says yes, then you can imagine what people are going to infer from that. If he says no, he's not being cooperative, then you kind of get the sense that you're not getting answers from Keegan Klein. The fact that he wouldn't answer it, I think, is really, really interesting, right? So that is from this particular site. Delphi murders facts will come out at trial, and that is also from yesterday. So I'll put a link to that as well. Then there's a final headline I want to talk to you guys about at some length, and that is this one. I'm sure you've seen it. This one from the Journal and Courier, which is the local news agency. Petition seeks to keep Abby and Libby arrest evidence sealed in Delphi murder arrest, right? What do you guys think about that? So let me ask you guys a couple of questions. Is there anyone here who wants to jeopardize the investigation? Is there anyone here, if I ask the question, do you want to jeopardize the investigation, would your answer be yes? Lisa McGuinness says, hey, Nick, I don't think he could have friends because that might have been exposed. Yeah, well, also, you don't want to get too friendly with the neighbors or with your neighborhood. You probably want to keep a low profile. So, yeah, everyone says, no, I don't want to jeopardize the investigation. Let me ask you another question. Who wants the affidavit unsealed right now? Who's sort of been saying, let's get the affidavit unsealed. Let's look at what's in there. Jennifer Wade says, if he's not cooperating, how was he able to get 5 of his charges dropped? Absolutely. That's a great answer. Thanks for that, Melly. So do you guys agree if I say that, well, let me ask a third question. And I want you guys to be honest. Have you been feeling impatient that the affidavit comes out? Have you been leaving comments saying, why are we not getting to see what's in it? All that kind of thing. In other words, have you kind of through social media been exerting a kind of pressure? Under pressure. So Gloria Kemp says, no, let the police get this right. So Koi Cat says, I want it done on Ali's own time. Van Lechimp says, we must all be patient. Hi, Margaret Zabinski. Absolutely. That's getting to what I'm talking about. So, as I say, I haven't actually paid any attention to other YouTubers covering this. Here and there will be a kind of a recommendation coming on my YouTube feed, but I either say not interested or ignore it. But for the most part, I actually have no idea what they're saying. I do suspect that there's some mischief going on based on what we're seeing and based on the judge recusing himself and all sorts of things like that. And if I just apply what happened in the Kylie Rodney case, which is law enforcement is corrupt and it's all a big cover up, and when we don't hear what we want to hear when we want to hear it, it's a big conspiracy and the whole town is in on it. And I wouldn't be surprised if the same filthy, toxic accusations that went into Truckee become targeted at Delphi. I really wouldn't be surprised if that happens, right? the same thing, targeting a small town because you want to know your answers and you don't really care about anything else, right? So Magical Mother says, do we have a right to know? I don't know if you could say we don't have a right to know. We do have a right to know, but I think it's also fair to say, do we have a right to know right now? Can we also not just be patient, right? Jennifer Wade says it needs to stay sealed. Bria, good to see you. Bria sent me some footage of her doing all sorts of somersaults. She's quite an amazing gymnast. So the bottom line is this information is going to come to light, but all we need to do is be patient, right? YouTube isn't known for its patience. It's all about it's a competition. It's a race to the bottom, who can get their stuff out as fast as possible. But do you agree that the reason they're sealing it is actually in order to, number one, to some extent, protect the presumption of innocence, in other words, protect the case, and number two, so that an impartial jury can be selected? Do you guys agree with that? Patience is a virtue. So we've just got to be a little bit patient. Yeah, they are sealing it for a reason. Mick Stowe says we have a right to know if the community is safe. For that, we do need at least a little more info. On that topic, I think it's interesting that you see this from the residents. A petition on change.org urges the Carroll County prosecutor to keep sealed the probable cause affidavit. The petition has more than 550 signatures. And I think you've got to ask, where do you think that petition came from? Do you think it came from the locals? So in terms of this petition, I just want to refer to a few quotes. This one is from Hawesville, Kentucky. So it's not a local, but her name's Deborah Rust. She says, we have waited 5.5 years for this arrest to happen. We, the public, can wait for details to ensure finding an impartial jury is more likely to be found, and to ensure that there's more, that the accused are more likely to receive justice, ensure perpetrators that are less likely to receive a mistrial. We, the public, do not want him to walk. Anyone else potentially linked. Anyway, so that's one. Then there's someone else from Logansport, Bonnie Van Winkle, says, I don't want this investigation jeopardized. Our need to know isn't as important as getting this case properly resolved and justice served. Okay, so it's quite interesting. Definitely quite interesting. It is important to be patient. You must remember these are like unquestionably minors, and we have got no idea what happened to them. And I think you can imagine that it's not something that their families want public. It's painful to have that information out and people speculating about it. We've just had Kylie Rodney's autopsy read out by YouTubers, like the whole thing. I don't think they want that in this case. I really don't think they want that in this case. Keegan Klein has had 5 charges dropped, but that's already quite old news. He's also had 12 charges sort of not reduced, but sort of lessened. Okay, so by the way, I don't know if you guys know, Scott Peterson is going to find out about a month from now whether he's getting a new trial. And all of that was based on a juror that may not have been completely honest. So you can have mischief or little details that can totally ruin a prosecution. And so law enforcement have got to be careful. They've got to be careful that that sort of thing doesn't happen. And I think it's harder and harder to do that these days. Okay, so I want to bring up a particular image. So I want to talk briefly about the recusal of Judge Dina, and we are going to get back to this aerial photo. So Judge Benjamin Dina's decision to recuse himself, to be honest, I think the reason is obvious. But let me ask you guys, why do you think Judge Dina recused himself? What do you think the reason was for that? You know, like they talk about it's a need to know basis and you don't need to know. Do we need to know right now? Okay, so some people say too high profile a case, some people say threats. Yeah, that's really a good question. I don't know, but it's definitely something interesting. Okay, so I think the reason that he recused himself is because of social media, or as I call it, social media. He would rather spare himself and his family being in the crosshairs of true crime, which, let's face it, is a rabid animal. Not all of it, but a lot of it is a rabid animal these days. It's a law unto itself. So this was the headline in the same day that Dina recused himself. It was this headline. You see that? Let me do it like that. Public's bloodlust. When he talks about public's bloodlust, what do you think he's really referring to there? This is kind of from the document that I think he signed. Also, I've mentioned this already, YouTube was brought up pertinently, like the word YouTube was brought up in the court documents on the same day. Here it is. YouTube Maelstrom referenced in Delphi docs. I have in the past criticized certain creators on YouTube without naming them. And I think this criticizing, so when I've criticized them, I think a lot of people thought, you're just jealous or you're just trying to, you're in a competition with them or it's kind of a social media rat race. I don't know whether people thought, you know what, in terms of right and wrong, isn't what they're doing right or wrong? And I do think you've got some people in true crime that are good, the good guys. I think you've got some people in true crime that are less good. And then I do think there's some people in true crime that are kind of like the bad guys. They'll do anything. They'll do anything. And you might say it's a feeding frenzy and it's first come, first serve. That's not how I see it. But the point is that criticism that I've directed to certain creators, it's not only coming from me, it's coming from journalists, it's even coming from judges, right? True Crime had a party, as I said, with the folks in Truckee, including law enforcement, and now they're up to the same thing in Delphi, and I say that through inference. I don't know exactly what's been going on, but let's make everyone a suspect, including the judge and his family. And I did see something where they were saying bridge guy is Ron Logan. Ron Logan. I did see that somewhere, and I suppose you could kind of go through everybody. Bridge guy is, what about the neighbor that that spoke on camera. You could do that whole rigmarole, and I'm sure that get a lot of views, right? You know what I'm talking about. Stephanie, good to see you. Not Sunshine Country Chicken says, just poor judgment to say what is already said about the case. Okay. Alison says, did the judge see any evidence? I hope so. I hope, because it does need legislation. Definitely does. Okay. What else did I want to go through? True crime isn't any or ordinary social media. You can't just say social media wants to be freed. You know, social media shouldn't have any restraints. There's social media, and then there's true crime, which is dealing with facts in people's lives and justice and reputations and, you know, right and wrong. And, you know, someone can go to prison or they cannot go to prison based on certain things. And it's not ordinary social media. And even if social media and its audience don't think you need credentials in true crime, if they maybe think it's entertainment, when it comes to the law and legal cases, actually you do need to tread carefully. You do need some expertise. You need to be aware and wary of the facts and other areas where one needs to tread sensitively. And true crime, I feel, needs to self-govern itself and be self-disciplined. And would you say there was a lot of that in the Kylie Rodney case? Do you think there was sort of self-discipline in the way people spoke about the case and thought about the case and things that were said and suggested? I think it needs to be self-governing, self-disciplined in how they handle sensitive cases. The Kylie Rodney case was actually quite sensitive, unusually sensitive, because there were a lot of very young people in that, but especially where it includes minors. And if they can't self-govern, or they won't, then you've got to start legislating it. You've got to start saying, that's not right. You don't seem to care that it's not right. So we need laws and rules to make people care. So what we've seen instead is that social media, I don't know, it seems to think it's above the law, even when it's ostensibly crying foul about injustice. So this weird hypocrisy. I think there's a red flag there. I think what's happening there is not right. Injustice. Meanwhile, social media itself is becoming more and more unjust. We saw this earlier this year when you had social media tempests chock full of defamatory statements. Just everything was nasty and defamatory and toxic. In the middle of a huge defamation trial, that the trial was about, you shouldn't make unsubstantiated statements about someone. And so what did social media do? Just made lots of unsubstantiated statements. Look, I think she sniffed cocaine, or I think she did something, on and on and on and on. And the whole thing was like, well, you seem to be immune to the irony of your own hypocrisy, right? And I understand that having this conversation isn't good for my channel. I understand that what people want and what the audience want. I understand that, right? I really do understand that. And I also understand it's not good for my channel to highlight that. But I'm afraid I actually care about the truth, and I care more about justice than I care about making money. Fact. Someone was saying, I'm so glad you're covering this case. I'm probably going to kind of stop covering this case now. I'm probably going to shelve it for a while, because I think that is the right thing to do under the circumstances. So after this video, unless there's sort of pertinent news, I don't think I'm really going to be covering it much, right? If something comes up that's worth it, I will, but I'm not going to just try and sort of suck content out of my thumb, right? Okay, so with that being said, let's look at 1967 Whiteman Drive, right? That's that address. Now, if you look at the, well, if I take that away for a second, and you look at the image behind me, that big black post box, mailbox, actually obscures exactly what you want to be looking at. So exactly where that mailbox is the part that you can't see, or that you want to see. The part that you can't see is the part that you want to see. And it's, can you see it's through there? Now, we're going to look at the aerial photo in a moment, but can you see from the road, you can see right into the back garden. You can also see where that one digging area was. And there's the shed. I was quite surprised. I was kind of like, wow, there's not really much perimeter fencing, obvious perimeter fencing. It's a very kind of open plan lawn, isn't it? So when you look at this image and you say, okay, so if there was evidence found, and according to the poll, 96% of you think that if there was evidence was found, and according to the poll, 96% of you think evidence was found in the garden was found, and according to the poll, 96% of you think evidence. Where's that article? I think it's from the New York Post. They talk about that search. I just want to see if I can find it here. They were definitely snooping around the fire pit at the backyard. Flashlights, lots of pictures, lots of sifting. Can you guys see that? So anyway, the question is, did they find something? And then the other part of that question is, so that's the aerial view. The other part of that question is, if they found something outside, where did they find something? Where would they have, or could they have found something, right? Now, what I want to sort of highlight here is, if you are at the road, and we're going to come back to that other image in a second, we're going to come back to that image. But if you're on the road here, right, can you see that you can see right through there? So if you wanted to, let me bring it up like so. If you wanted to bury or conceal something all along here, well, you can see straight down there based on the road, right? If a car was going by, right? And theoretically the same going that way, right? I'm talking about from the road perspective. So if someone is driving by, they could see all the way down there. I don't know if you would want to put anything here. You'd, I guess, have to dig up the lawn. But if you look down there, you've also got that sort of line of sight. And then, of course, there's a house right here. There's a house right here. So would you want to put anything over here? Obviously, assuming is someone home or not, right? Over there is the shed. And I think the fire pit is on that side of the shed. So on that side of the shed is away from that road, away from being able to see there, away from that neighbor. The problem is that it is visible from that neighbor. It's visible from that neighbor, although not quite as visible, because there's a tree in the way and kind of a swimming pool in the way as well. So if you were quite low on the ground, theoretically, it wouldn't be that easy to see. Of course, you can see this also from the road. So I guess if you were between this tree and over here, maybe that would be one of the best spots to do something. And maybe you do it at night, who knows? But I was quite surprised at how open this garden was. I'm not sure if you were. Okay, so that's one sort of view. Here's another one, another kind of angle. Now we're looking over the post box, over the mailbox. It's quite a big tree over there, I guess. So if you live here and you were faced with the challenge of disposing of evidence, where would you, or where could you do it with the least chance of being seen? Now, I must say, when I saw these pictures, I kind of thought, jeepers, it's almost impossible to do this without being seen if you spend any length of time. The only way you could maybe do it without being seen is if you know that people are not home. Otherwise, you're taking kind of a risk, right? On the other hand, it could just look like you are burning leaves or having a barbecue or something like that, right? But that does bring up this thing that inside the house is a better possibility, except what if your wife stumbles on something? What if your child stumbles on something, right? I can also tell you, I was digging in my garden yesterday, all over, and I was trying to get soil because I'd bought some flowers, and I was trying to put the soil in pot plants because I didn't really have enough potting soil. So people do potter around the garden. It's not all cloak and dagger. So you could do something that's nefarious, but it seems innocent, like you gardening. But the other thing is, there's virtually no gardening going on in that if you look at that, there's virtually no garden anywhere. There's certainly no garden going on here. But what about mowing the lawn, right? What about mowing the lawn, and where would you throw that? Also, where are the garbage bins? Not quite clear to see. So what we do know is that they photographed the inside of the shed, and I do think that is a really that is something that is outside the house, and you'd imagine that Kathy wouldn't go there very much, and also that Brittany wouldn't go there very much. So who would go there? And could something have been buried in the shed or very close to the shed? And I think that's a possibility. Could something have been put inside the shed in a drum or in a some kind of container? That's definitely a possibility. Stephanie says probably in the garage. Yeah, I think it's a he shed. Yeah. So let's have a look at another image, just giving us another sense of the neighbors. So when you look at that image, you can see that's the house, and he probably doesn't have to worry about this neighbor because he's got that barrier over there, and he doesn't really have to worry about over here, just cars coming down here. And the other thing is that this is quite a quiet neighborhood. It's on a quiet side of town, and although this road is probably fairly busy, this road, Whiteman Drive, ends up in a cul-de-sac. So it's not likely to have a lot of traffic going up and down this road. It's a short road with a cul-de-sac, and it's only got approximately not sure if that's a house. Let's say it is a house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 maybe 8 houses on it. It's not a lot of homes on one road, right? So I don't know if you'd have to worry too much about views through there and views through there, but maybe it is something to worry about. It seems as though something may have been found here. It's possible that something was found over here. And if you think about it, that is quite a good spot to hide something, because that neighbor, especially if it is behind the shed, wouldn't be able to see it that clearly, this neighbor. And this neighbor probably doesn't have too much interest in trying to see all the way over to there. He's got his back garden, he's got a swimming pool, and there's a tree in the way. So if you think of this entire area, what is the most shielded section of it? Wouldn't you agree that it's somewhere around here? Do you guys agree with that? That if you had to leave something outside, your most shielded area is here in terms of line of sight. Not really here, because you can see straight down there. Theoretically also straight through there. Theoretically also straight through there, I guess. This is maybe the most sheltered area, right? So let's have a look now at a zoomed in image of that same image. It's this one. Okay. So the shed, I think, is somewhere around here. And that tree sort of blocks some of the view that way. And although you can maybe see under the tree, the swimming pool is sort of in the way as well. But there is a little bit of obscuring what's going on there, right? Now, I want to show you something that's kind of in the same that's dealing with the same kind of thing, and it is the property belonging to Chair de Bell. See if I can bring up a good aerial shot of it. I'm not sure if I've still got one. Do I? Anyway, let's have a quick look at these images. So that is apparently what was unearthed. You can see there's quite a lot of leaves. Even now, you can't quite be sure how much soil was dug up there, but that does look like there's soil here. And then there's also this image. And you could imagine that on the other side of the shed, or very close to the shed, or inside the shed, maybe they found something. Is that what is that thing over there? Is that where they make a barbecue, or what is? Maybe it's just kind of a plate. I don't know. It's not. I thought it was like a kind of a grill or something, or the sort of bowl that when you make a fire, but it doesn't look like that is what it is. Now, if you look at these windows, they're not terribly. You can't imagine someone necessarily standing by those windows all day looking out. That looks like it could be a kitchen door. That looks like an opaque window. That could be a bathroom window, which is also opaque. So would anyone really be looking in this area from that perspective? of all the options, what's the best option? This side, on between this shed and the fence, or on that side, very close, very close to this side. There's also a tree. But of course, all of this is visible from the road. Everything you see is visible from the road. So isn't the best option what's right in front of you, the shed? Isn't that the best option? It is a big shed. Jody says the shed could have a dirt floor. It's possible. Let's look at some of your comments. Danielle says, not unless he knew they were going to search. So, well, I don't think he knew they were going to search. C. King says, I read somewhere a neighbor said they found a cat. I think that's speculation. I don't think we know what was found, but there is the what's the word? There's the issue that there was possibly pet hair or animal hair, and so what happened to that animal? Helena says, looks like that dig site is back by the fence. So that dig site could have been a fairly deep hole. That could have been a fairly deep hole. You know, when you dig ground out and then you cover it back over, some ground stays over. That is quite a big pile that remains. So it makes one wonder, how deep did they excavate over there? And again, to go back to this New York Post article, non-uniform officers searched his home and their property for 12 hours. They were definitely snooping around a lot at the fire pit and the backyard. In other words, he's not saying they looked there and then they left. He's saying they focused, they spent a lot of time at the fire pit and in the backyard. Flashlights, seems like they were doing quite a lot at night. Flashlights, lots of pictures, so it seems like they were taking photos inside the shed. Also lots of sifting of sand. And we also saw sifting of sand in the Patrick Frazee case, right? And that sifting of sand in the Patrick Frazee case actually led to one tooth fragment being found. Let me see if I can bring up that evidence. Patrick Frazee sifting sand. Not sure if I'm going to find anything here. Patrick Frazee gravel driveway burn patch. Maybe something will come up. There it is. There it is. So there you can actually see, this is in the Patrick Frazee case. I wrote a book about it, Murder Most Foul. And you can see there they're actually sifting through sand. It was a tote that was burnt on a driveway. Actually, they did find one tiny little bit of evidence. They found a tooth fragment. And an anthropologist was able to confirm that it belonged to an adult female. And that was the only evidence they found of Kelsey Bereth. So, and it was something crazy, like the very last handful of dirt that they passed through the sieve was when they found something. Like they were doing it for hours. They were doing it with lots of little handfuls of things. And the very last scoop, where they were like, okay, let's do one more scoop, that's when they found that tooth. That is tiny, tiny little fragment of a tooth. So the question is, did something like that Was something like that found in this case? Was it a fragment of clothing? Was it a fragment of jewelry? What was it? Or was there nothing? Did they actually not find anything in their search? I feel like they must have found something in order to come back with a search warrant to seize the vehicle. That's my theory. Okay, let's have a look at some of your comments. Jane Belinda says, I've always found it hard to dig under a tree because of roots from the tree, never much soil on the surface. That's some distance away from the tree, though. Nature Lover says they took a lot of items. That's also interesting. We know that they spent quite a lot of time in the shed. Yeah, it's difficult to say what they could have found. How neat is the shed? Charles says, "What up from Maryland? Good to see you." My King of Kings says, "I don't even want to imagine what is in that shed." The fact that they took photos in that shed suggests that there was something worth photographing. That shed looks to be raised and leveled with a floor. Typically, that type of shed would have a plywood or particle board floor. Possible that under the floor something was buried as well. Why would they wait until it was dark to search back there? I don't think they waited until it was dark. I think they searched for so long that eventually it was dark. And you kind of get the idea that they searched and searched and searched, and then they felt like we've found something here, but it was late in the afternoon and they kept concentrating in that area. That's the impression I got. Lacer says you can look at the doors until he cut those out himself for easy access. Okay. Nisi says, I must exit. We'll catch the rerun. Great group in here. Sounds good. Charles says there must have been much evidence found. I think it depends on what you think about when you say what is a lot of evidence. I think a piece of clothing and like a tiny piece of clothing and a piece of jewelry, I would count that as a lot of evidence. Someone else would maybe not. Kat says, we all would like to have a blow-by-blow account of this investigation. We need to allow Ali and the judicial system to do what they were created to do. Yeah. My King of Kings says, if someone has a private space that nobody's allowed into, okay. That's a good point from Stephanie. Yeah, we don't know for a fact what the shed significance is, but seems like there is some significance to that. Stephanie asked, what kind of vehicle was confiscated? I just know it sort of looks like a dark sort of color. Is there a lock on the shed doors? That does look like, actually, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Nature Lover says, too bad we won't get much more info for a long time. Well, it might be 1 or 2 months. I mean, if you think about the Caitlin Armstrong case, it took, initially it took not that long for the trial to sort of go in motion, but then she hired a really elite lawyer. I don't think Richard Allen has the means to hire a top attorney. If his wife, this is quite interesting, if his wife decides to support her husband, maybe they'll mortgage their house or sell their house. Do you think she will, though? I doubt it. Yeah, it could be a keyhole door. It does seem like it could be kind of a man cave, and he seems like the kind of guy who would be a man cave guy. Yeah, I don't think it's hard to imagine that someone would. Anyway, I guess we'll see. True Crime Time says his wife may dump him. Okay, do I have anything else I want to share with you guys? I think that is about it. Yeah. So quite a short live. I kind of just wanted to take you guys through the headlines and talk about the recusal and our responsibilities as well. Some of us who take the responsibility seriously as true crime creators, but also I think a lot of you are also very, especially my subs on this channel, are also very conscientious and then just looking at the aerial view, and we've sort of done that. I don't know if I'm going to be really covering much besides that. We've dealt with the neighbors. I've dealt with pretty much everything I want to deal with. So unless something occurs to me that I haven't really touched on, I think I'm going to be wrapping up my coverage of this case today. And as I say, if new news comes about, then I will maybe cover it. If some epiphanies occur to me in terms of the area and the maps, then we'll maybe look at that. But I think I'm going to be one YouTuber who's going to cover other things that I have been meaning to cover going forward. And I'm going to give the Delphi community a little bit of space and law enforcement a little bit of time to get what they need going. I feel quite bad that the judges felt so pressured that he's recused himself. I feel quite bad about that. I definitely feel quite bad about that. It's not how justice should be. Let me see if I can bring up that image again. These are a couple of images of Richard Allen, still quite dour, quite unsmiling, quite sour. Here he's at looks like a kid's place. Here he is hiking. Again, young people in the background. He's wearing a hat. Oh, he's not wearing a hat there. It's quite interesting. Can you see he's got kind of curly hair, like the sketch? You can imagine when his hair is longer, it's still kind of curly. Young people behind him over there, and then there's this one. He's also got a hat on, and there's a bit of an attempt at a smile over there. But the image I want to show you guys is this one. So I kind of don't want to be part of that maelstrom. I mean, I'm not, I feel like I'm not speculating in a reckless or harmful or salacious way, but still I feel like the interest in the case maybe needs to subside so that law enforcement can do what they need to do and not worry about us, worry about attention. And yeah, I think there are YouTubers that are making direct contact with people trying to get the scoop. That's also taking place. Yeah. So Paul says, "What is a maelstrom?" It's kind of like a whirlpool, right? Something kind of going down the. It's kind of just like almost like a hurricane, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, the other side is I don't know if there's really that much more to cover, but I think I'm going to step away from it for a while. But I am going to. There is other stuff I want to cover in terms of other cases. So unless something happens, I'm going to be just shelving it for a little while, and maybe for 2 weeks, maybe whatever. We'll see. If there's some big revelation, I'll obviously cover it. But if there's not, I won't. Thanks a lot for that, Deborah. Okay. Okay, let's deal with the final couple of questions and points. We had 55 minutes. We'll sort of go on to about 1 hour. Wolfie says someone that they thought the young sketch was done from a Parabon image. Not quite sure what that means. Bridge guy got a strange walk, unless the bridge was not easy to walk on. I don't really think it's a strange walk. I think it's but he is an overweight fellow. So Stephanie says they updated Bridge Guy's sketch and said the first one was not who they were looking for. So that was super confusing. What that could have referred to is, like, bear in mind Ron Logan died, and you kind of got the idea. Didn't you get the idea that the one sketch looked like a younger person, or put otherwise, the one sketch looked like a younger person, the other one looked like an older person. That doesn't that look like quite a young person? Where's my other image of this? There it is. That guy looks a lot younger than that guy. The central aspect here is a match, I think, for Richard Allen. Like from this picture, this part of the face matches, whereas this part of the face sort of matches that. Kind of quite weird. Okay. You would actually imagine that with technology, that they could feed the video into a computer, and it could kind of render it in a very could sort of take the noise out of the image, and that computers could actually generate a sketch based on the information that is recorded on the original footage. You'd imagine that advanced computers could actually do that. And maybe you could even, in a way, use artificial intelligence to mix the sketch and the image together. You know. Diane says one looks in the early 30s, the other 40s or 50s. So I think there's one more thing I wanted to point out, and it's to do with the timing of this. I think it's a very big clue in this case is that it happened the day before Valentine's Day. If you think about a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old and Valentine's Day, I think they are far more vulnerable to suggestion leading up to Valentine's Day. I think they think about it, a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old that don't have a boyfriend and someone who's being nice to them and someone who wants to meet them. I think they're far more vulnerable to suggestion. Do you guys agree with that? Not only that, I think a father of a young teenage girl would know that, right? He would know that how his daughter has been very giddy and excited about, and maybe even concerned about Valentine's Day, right? And don't you think that is a big factor? And if you think about Valentine's Day, it tends to be a day filled with expectation. And isn't that exactly what Bridge Guy led these girls to believe? They led them to expect something. They did expect something, and he played with that expectation. Think about other days that young kids have great expectations, right? Think about Christmas and the John Benet Ramsey case, and you can also have great expectations there, and how certain expectations can play into certain dramas and dynamics, right? Yeah, I mean, you can even talk about, or to be someone's Valentine. I mean, so in the Kelsey Bereth case, it was on Thanksgiving. And you can imagine how the last thing she would have anticipated on Thanksgiving would be that she would be murdered. She didn't see that coming. In other words, that's also using someone's expectations and their what's the word, being unassuming and being in a pleasant state of mind, use that against them. Yeah, fed them with pipe dreams. Yeah. Was there anything else I wanted to touch on? Yeah, a 13 or 14-year-old wants a boyfriend on Valentine's Day. And wasn't someone giving them that false hope, right? Wasn't someone giving them that false hope? Okay. Okay, so that's it from me. Let's have a look. Stephanie says they probably felt excitement to hang out. Anne says teenage girls are impressionable and he used that to trap them. Kelly says Anthony Shots was wooing one of the girls before Valentine's. Well, actually on the day of the murders. Surya says, Sue says, I would like to know how Alan met up with him. Well, we did deal with that, basically, that they approached from the north side. They crossed the bridge. They probably arranged that they would cross the bridge, and then it would be very hard to go back across the bridge because it wouldn't be easy because it's a very long bridge, right? And that's already separating them from the safety net of the public walking path. Also, he is approaching from the north afterwards, so they would have to pass him in order to go back the same way. And then if they did want to flee, well, he probably did have a gun. So that would have, I wonder whether he didn't carry some kind of restraints like rope or something to tie them down. I wonder whether that wasn't part of his game plan. Yeah, Scott Peterson case, Christmas, we'll see. SW Firefly says, we are in the minority here. Dave says, I think it was a random encounter. I don't, because I think there was a lot of fantasy. And so fantasy leads to premeditation, just like you see with Jeffrey Dahmer. Stephanie says, it's unfortunate they were trapped. They couldn't run back past him. I think the using of the video was meant to say I've got this video of you, so you'd be crazy to do this anyway, and then didn't he? The video was meant to be a kind of pushback, right? Rambro says rumors are, yeah, that he, yeah, I mean, that's a lot of people are thinking that. Wolfie says, did you know the real model that was Anthony Shots is a cop in Alaska now? I did know that. Quite a good looking cop, obviously. Yeah, he had his hand in his pocket. Helen says, thanks again for your investigation, hard work. I did, with permission, recommend your channel on another channel for people looking for accurate information. Thanks. That's kind of you. Thanks for that. Run the World says, girls that age are naive enough to believe a guy like the one on Facebook would be interested in them. Yeah. Especially when it's leading to Valentine's Day and you're hoping you're hoping for a nice romantic day, and you've got a friend that's also getting very excited right next to you. Deborah says, when he says hi to Timmy, Timmy's, I think, sleeping. I actually need to go and sleep as well. Okay, last couple of questions. Stephanie says, thanks for that. True Jedi Forever says, I think restraints make sense. There were restraints in the West Memphis 3 case where there were 3 8-year-old boys. Okay. Thanks a lot, Lisa. So, yeah, I thought it was really interesting seeing some of the aerial shots and just getting a better idea of the garden. But yeah, that is it from my side. I'll obviously be monitoring and looking at the case and reporting on it on Patreon, and I'll be keeping an eye on it. But until there's fairly major developments, I don't think I'll be continuing coverage. But I do think the coverage I am going to be putting on is going to be quite worthwhile anyway. Probably not that popular, but certainly I think worthwhile. So, okay. Do you think the West Memphis 3 are guilty? Well, maybe you should read my book, King of Freaks. Bria says, I think a knife was involved. It's quite a tough one because you can run away from someone with a knife, especially if you're 2 people, unless they're holding on to you or you're very close to them. Run the World, thanks so much for that. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, Gray Hughes, I think he posted something about that law enforcement know that Bridge guy is not Keegan Klein. I think that comes from this newspaper. Comes from that. Law enforcement never suspected Klein of being Bridge guy, right? Also, he seemed to know who Bridge guy was. Really, really interesting. Okay, if you guys want to read that, you can read that in, I'll put a link to that in chat. Okay. So thanks a lot, guys. I must also just thank Lisa Breck. Thanks very much for that. Crime Geek, you've just joined as I'm about to skedaddle. Just another point about a knife is, if you're going to use a knife, someone who dies from a knife wound will likely scream, and it's very painful, and it's not an instant death. And I don't know whether the killer really wanted there to be noises. So what I actually think is that he used a gun, but he didn't actually discharge the gun. The gun was a sort of a tool of coercion, a tool of control. But I don't actually think. Then you might say, so where did the blood come from? It could have come from a particular act, is all I'm going to say. I suppose if you've got your hand over someone's mouth, you could use a knife, I suppose. But you see, it's a really becomes quite an unpleasant line of speculation, isn't it? Stephanie says, I think chemicals were used. That's a great comment, because we know that he was a pharmacist. So that definitely is possible. But we also know that there was blood. Okay, my King of Kings says something over there. That's true. That's true. But then he also had a little bit of he was married as well, and he had a different. It's quite interesting what you say there. I think a valid question is, was the Ripper was interested in violence? Was Bridge Guy? And I kind of think the answer is yes. Yeah, pharmacist tech, that is technically the right thing. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for. Is there anyone else I would to thank here? I think there is. Maybe not. Okay, Sunday Piper says, who said there was blood? Well, in the probable cause affidavit from, I think, 2020 or 2021, that dealt with Ron Logan, they said that there was a lot of blood. Also that there was a lot of blood, likely blood on the victim's clothing. That was the other thing that was said. Thanks a lot to Helen back. Thanks a lot. Guys, have a great weekend. I'm going to be watching the rugby. I think South Africa is playing Ireland tomorrow. I've also got some long analysis to write, and I'm kind of going to work on my audiobook content. So that's kind of what I'm going to be focusing on. But have a good weekend. Take care. Take care of one another. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks a lot for the super chats, mods that are here. Stephanie, thanks very much. Bria as well. And then all the members and all the new subs, really appreciate you. If you've been enjoying this coverage, I will obviously be continuing it on Patreon. But otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Take care and be patient.